Today's episode of Transform Your Workplace is brought to you by Xenium HR. Learn more about how Xenium's supporting small and medium-sized organizations with their HR, payroll, and benefits administration so they can focus on their mission and growing their organization. Learn more at xeniumhr.com. Today's episode features Tate Hackert. Tate is the president and founder of ZayZoon. And full disclosure for listeners, ZayZoon is a vendor of Xenium's. We partner with them for earned wage access and financial wellness tools. And so today's episode is a little bit of a product feature. You're going to kind of come along with me as I learn more about this earned wage access option for employees. And so we talk about what it is, what's the driving need behind it, and how it can help employees through tough times financially, driving inflation. Maybe employees are short on cash until their next paycheck and they need an option for getting access to money now. And so we talk about that and also just the financial wellness aspect of it. Like we talk about why employers should be offering tools to employees to help educate them on financial health. Just like we talk about physical and emotional health and how employers are getting involved in that, financial wellness is no different. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. It's a little different just because we're talking about a product, but I think it'll be good knowledge for you if you're not aware of what earned wage access is. So enjoy today's episode. Make sure to connect with Tate on LinkedIn and make sure to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Thanks for the download today. We'll talk to you next week. Tate, it's a pleasure to have you on Transform Your Workplace. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It's awesome.
Yeah, you bet. We're in interesting times right now. We're experiencing high inflation. And I think that, ultimately has an impact on everyday people, especially lower earners. What's happening right now from your perspective?
Oh, man. Yeah, it's interesting times for sure. So ZayZoon just completed a 75-day RV tour across the U.S. And so I went from LA to New York and everywhere in between on this tour. And it was incredible to see the effects firsthand, right? I think especially among a lot of the cities that you might not go to necessarily normally, people are affected, certainly, right? Like, I don't know how much is needed to be said on it, to be honest, because the headlines do a good job. People are hurting. I saw one the other day talking about higher income earners actually shopping more and more at Walmart. So it kind of does show that it's not just individuals at the lower end of the spectrum, but this wage compression and everything that's affected by inflation is sort of occurring across the board, right?
Yeah, it seems like wages aren't keeping up fast enough. As we know, like inflation's been 8 to 7% month over month. And I don't think wages are keeping up fast enough. Like even when pay raises were coming around, it seems like employers were still doing the 3 or 4% increases and not keeping up with the inflation rate of like 7 or 8%. So what's your perspective on just where we're at, where we're going?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And it's difficult sometimes, right? Like as a small business, as any business, you're also trying to look out for your bottom line, but you want to balance that financial well-being of your employees, right? And so certainly I think businesses need to do more when it comes to pay raises and everything else. I think there's also a play though, where it isn't always just an income issue, but it's a cash flow issue. And so that's something, at ZayZoon that we tackle specifically, and we can kind of get into that later. But as this inflation takes hold and your bills go up, they go up across the board. They're not just going up in aggregate, but it's actually occurring at the various points in time. And so as someone that might not be great with budgeting to begin with, all of a sudden, your bill on the 5th is 10% higher than it used to be. Your bill on the 7th is 10% higher than it used to be. Maybe you go grocery shopping and groceries are probably even more than the 8% posted inflation in some cases. And by the time your payday hits on the 15th, you might not have any money left and even be in the hole. And so I think there's absolutely an income issue, but there's also just that budgeting issue that is sort of exasperated by the inflationary effects, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I even noticed this personally, but like, a grocery trip, I'm just round numbers, might cost $100 and now it seems like it's costing like 125. It's just like everything's a little marginally increased and it just sort of snuck up on us. And to your point about cash flow, it's like well, I was banking on paying XYZ for, food, energy, the things that we need. That's where inflation hits first, is the things that everybody needs, right? And so then you've cash flow issues. I can't help but to think that other things are taking a back seat, like savings rates, retirement. I mean, in the conversations that you've had on your RV tour, did you learn anything from just people who are experiencing this?
Oh man, so that was the greatest part about that tour was we started it in September of 2022 with the idea that we'd bring only a few team members on. We'd bring maybe 6 or 7 team members along for the ride. And by the time that we finished it 75 days later, we'd brought 41 ZayZooners along for this journey. And of course, we're not all in the RV at the same time, but we'll go to a specific city. We'll fly in a couple people. We'll kind of do some employee visits situated around that. And then they'll fly out and a new group will fly in and we'll go on to the next city. But yeah, I mean, like certainly talking with customers, the objective and why we brought so many ZayZooners on the road with us is the objective of that RV tour sort of shifted from when we began. And so we began with this thought of let's launch businesses, let's really grow the business, right? And as we went through it, it was like, well, actually, you know what? The objective and what we see the real value here being is the knowledge share among the team, the conversations that we can have with customers, the context that we can build for each other in these times, right? Because they are super unprecedented in many instances, not just from like inflation and end of COVID and workplace changing, but then also, very specifically to what we're doing, employers looking for new benefits in the workplace so that they can help combat those things. Earned wage access as an industry is kind of exploded. And so hearing firsthand from employees and employers on site, how it's benefiting them, how it's not benefiting them, all of these things were really interesting for myself to hear firsthand, but then also the employees that we brought along, whether it was a software developer who might not have ever talked to one of our customers virtually or otherwise, all the way to a finance representative or a customer service individual. It was really neat to see that contextual sharing take place.
Yeah, I think any like great product marketing organization, like they listen to their customers and they figure out what their needs are. And I imagine like when you were talking to some of these employers and even some of their employees, employee engagement, it's been down for some time. I don't know if it's just as a result of the pandemic or whatnot, but their needs are evolving, they're changing. Seems like I'm just speaking generally, but people are a little bit less happy. And I can't help but to think if there's a tie-in with the personal finance situation, like is there, based on financial health, me as an individual employee and my overall happiness and health at work, I mean, are those connected?
I mean, I think so, right? I'm in that business. I think so. And I think that the data shows it as well. Someone that's financially stressed is less productive. They're less happy in their workplace and they're more susceptible to changing jobs. It's a pretty simple formula. So if an employer can help increase that financial wherewithal for an employee, and again, that can be through a raise, keeping up with inflation, like you said, or it can also be through better education. It can be through different financial perks. It can be through various ways that they can make their money go further. I can get into some of the specifics that we have at ZayZoon as well. But so on the topic of making your money go further, one of the products ZayZoon has is a mechanism where an employee can take their wages early, but they can take it in the form of a gift card. And that gift card, we have over 250 retailers that they can use that at. A really good example is CVS. CVS sort of always has this bonus attached to it, this consistent bonus. But an employee can come into ZayZoon, they can take their wages early in the form of a CVS gift card. That gift card actually comes with an additional 7% of spend. So they're going to CVS regardless, they're taking $100 to spend there, they actually get $107 of spending power. And so things like that are really interesting because it is really, you had mentioned earlier, the inflation being 7-8% and seeing wages maybe not necessarily tracking to that. Well, an employer that maybe doesn't want to or can't fulfill that entire pay raise gap, what are products that they can bring in place to help someone's spend go further? And we see all the time our average boost percentage is in that 7% range, which is really interesting for an employee.
That's incredible. Yeah, so let's step back a little bit. You've mentioned earned wage access several times. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of listeners that don't even know what that is. So let's just use a scenario of like, let's say I'm in a pinch and I'm like, I've got to put food on the table and I need to go to the grocery store, but I don't have the cash flow. I don't have anything in my savings account. I don't have anything in my checking account. And I can't wait another couple of days till my next paycheck. What are the solutions for that?
Yeah, so historically, and actually still today, it's a massive industry, but we like to say historically because we're sort of looking ahead and seeing what we believe to be the future of this. But, overdraft fees is a very big industry. Overdraft is essentially, as a consumer, you spend more than you have in your bank account and your bank charges you for going into the negative. The second thing that's really common is payday lending. Payday lending is this concept of going to usually a store in a seedy neighborhood and going in and handing over a couple pay stubs and requesting on average about $300. And unfortunately, what happens is that $300 comes with a huge price tag. Going back to the RV Roadshow, we had numerous conversations with people that had used payday loans in the past. And title loans. Title loans is very analogous to a payday loan. However, it uses your vehicle as collateral. One individual, a story that sticks out, and title loans are a lot less known, right? But they're just as bad. One story that sticks out is we were in Mississippi, and an individual took out a $400 title loan and was paying $828 in fees. So they took $400, and 12 months later, they paid back $1,248. And that is really what earned wage access helps to combat. So earned wage access is this same sort of utility. It gives someone flexibility in between pay periods, right? So paydays on the 15th and the 31st, say, if you're paid semi-monthly. Well, those times in between, like we had chatted about, you might have a bill that pops up. You might have, these various expenses. If you are very close to that line, your checks and balances in place, and if maybe you are getting behind on budgeting or whatever else, you have something unexpected come up, you can fall into a short cash flow crunch. And again, historically, you'd use one of those other products. Earned wage access, though, is this beautiful solution that an employer can provide whereby an employee can access the pay that they've already earned, but have not yet actually been paid for. So what we at ZayZoon typically see is someone comes in maybe 8 or 9 days before their regularly scheduled payday. They find themselves in a crunch. Typically, this is short-term necessities, medication, groceries, rent, and they are taking, a couple $100 from ZayZoon. And when their payday rolls around 8, 9 days later, that $100 is automatically deducted from their paycheck. And what's really beautiful about our solution is that $100 might not even have a fee attached to it. So in the sense of our Boost product, an employee can take their wages to a gift card, and that gift card costs them nothing. And in fact, most of the time it makes them money because there's a bonus attached to that gift card paid by the retailer. And then, of course, there's other ways that they can access their money too, all the way to just simply sending it to their existing bank account.
What's fascinating about the way you're describing this is, if we look at historical context of, the short-term loans and the title loan, I didn't even know people were doing that.
Title loans are really interesting because effectively what you had is, Arizona is famous for this. Arizona banned payday lending, but they said, oh, well, you can just do title loans instead. And so effectively, it's just a marketing disguise.
Yeah,
right?
It's a shell game is all it is.
Exactly. It's the same thing. It's just disguised by marketing.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate for the consumer.
Yeah. What's really unfortunate about all those other options is I think a lot of people don't really understand how interest works. And so it's just, like the example of taking $400 out in cash and then you're paying $800 interest. And so now the total was $1,200. I think that's just insane versus this earned wage access. It's your money and there's just a very transparent fee associated with it. Is that how I'm understanding it?
Yeah, 100%. So this space of earned wage access in general, maybe I'll speak in generalities, but earned wage access is typically the ability for an employee to come in before their payday, access up to a couple $100 of their own money, and they can do so for a fee ranging from $0 to around $5.
Wow. So why has this evolved from the loans? And you said earned wage access is exploding as an industry. Why is it happening?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple reasons why it's exploded, right? I think just in general, it's a very obvious statement, but in general, you're seeing a lot more finances online. You've seen this rise of challenger banks or neobanks, companies like Chime and Varo pop up. These are all relatively new, right? They seem so big to us now, but they're only 10-year-old companies. And so you're sort of seeing this whole fintech landscape really evolve over the last decade. And I think you couple that with employees starting to take more control over their financial lives, but also their workplace. The power is more and more in the hands of the employee. And we can argue whether or not that's sort of staying true as there's been a bit of a shift in the labor market. But, ultimately I feel like it is. And employees just want more control over that pay. Now, historically, payroll has really been a relationship between the employer and the payroll company. And the employee is sort of just this end product that receives payments every 2 weeks. More and more, I believe, the employer and the payroll company and the companies that service them, like ourselves, see the value in that end consumer, right? And so I think that sort of confluence of events has really been why earned wage access has risen up as it has. And you couple that with the story that I said about, an individual paying $800 in fees. There's a really strong social mission behind this. And in my opinion, when you can have a business with a double bottom line, one that's, making money for shareholders, but at the same time providing a really amazing product to the consumer, it's a win-win.
To the employers that you're talking with and have added ZayZoon, or maybe they're using another earned wage access organization, do you think employers have an appetite for getting involved with their employees and their financial health? It seems like there's a financial wellness component to this, right? Like you're trying to teach them how to save, and you have tools and educational tools to help them, learn more about finances and how to manage. I'm just curious what the appetite is for employers to get involved.
Yeah, we're seeing a crazy appetite from employers. Just in general, earned wage access, employers are wanting a solution like this, right? It's, again, in part why the industry has taken off as it has. What's interesting is, in many cases, earned wage access simply fulfills a task that an employer was already doing. For any small business owners that are listening to this podcast, for example, think to yourself how many times you've given an advance on an employee's paycheck. I know for us, it's something that when we chat with the employers that we partner with, it's actually more often than you would think, right? And of course, that creates a big administrative burden. It creates sort of this awkward relationship between the employer and employee. And if you're giving it to this one person, should you give it to everyone? And do you want to give it to everyone? And it all of a sudden makes you in the advanced business versus the business that you're in. And going back to the RV tour, we had spoken with one organization. It was a larger organization, by ZayZoon standards, at least a few hundred employees. This organization was spending $100,000 annually, just shy of $100,000 annually, administering advances to their employees.
Oh my gosh. That's believable to me. We process payroll at Zenium for companies, and so we know what that is like, and it is totally administratively burdensome.
Yeah, you have the cost of the actual administrator and the hours that they're put into that, but then you also have hard costs like a new pay run or a wire fee or whatever else. And so those can add up. I think that that's probably at the very high end of the spectrum. But I think, again, for people that are listening, I'm sure that a lot of them can relate. And so all that to say, yeah, there's 100% an appetite for employers to better that employee base. The outcome that's produced from it is higher retention rates, better recruitment. We see with ZayZoon, employers are able to recruit up to 2 times faster. They're able to fill candidate pipelines 2 times faster because they advertise having this on-demand pay solution. And so that kind of speaks to the movement of money. Now, there's also that educational component. And for an employer, lots of employers don't know where to turn. They might have an EAP program. They might have an individual that comes in and maybe does a lunchroom session. Maybe it's a little bit harder to navigate now with remote work. But in any case, this isn't new, right? It might be new in the sense of how it's packaged and how it's more technologically advanced and everything else. But employers absolutely want to ensure that the money that they're giving their staff is being put to good use. We do some things, and most earned wage access providers do things in the sense of financial education and sort of trying to better how someone's interaction with that money is, and can they make that paycheck go further? That's ultimately the end goal in all of this, right? Is how can you provide responsible financial products to better an employee's financial life?
I love it. So if listeners are thinking like, wow, I've never explored this, I would love to see it in action or learn about what the possibilities are, where could they learn more?
So ZayZoon has a EWA buyer's guide that we produced. It's probably about 18 months old now, but I think it's still very relevant in the sense of the generalities of what you want to look for in an earned wage access solution. Not all earned wage access solutions are the same, right? It's going to depend on whether you're a large company, whether you're a small company, how much administrative power you can put into a solution. Do you utilize a card program? Do you have employees that are highly underbanked and do you need a card program? Or are your employees, do they have bank accounts and And do they not want to carry around extra plastic in their pocket? All of these things are things to consider. And then really when you look at the earned wage access landscape, it's just kind of backfilling and making a checklist for what's being hit, right? If I can, I'll speak to ZayZoon specifically. For us, we really see ourselves as the leading provider for the SMB space. Now, we think of the small and medium-sized businesses as being sort of 2,000 employees and below. And that's really where we thrive. These are typically employers that don't have large accounting and payroll and administrative functions. They might be franchisees with an owner operator or a manager at each location. They don't want the burden of back and forth file exchanges and updating their data on a daily basis. And so ZayZoon, by way of integrations with companies like yourselves, like Xenium, we're able to seamlessly grab that data and issue out payouts to employees without any employer intervention at all, which is really, really important. And then from an employee flexibility standpoint, we think it's really important to give employees flexibility. And so we are not a card solution. We do not require an employee to take another piece of plastic in their wallet, but we do have a card if they want one. It's a really simple concept, isn't it? You kind of just give employees choice because that's really what they want. They want this ability to access their pay in between paydays, and they want that ability to access it how they want. And so at ZayZoon, we have 3 ways that an employee can access their money. They can take it to their existing bank account. They can take it in the form of a gift card, typically with a bonus attached to it, which is really, really cool. Or they can take it to a ZayZoon branded Visa debit card. And that's sort of the earned wage access solution from ZayZoon in a nutshell.
I love it. My guest today has been Tate Hackert. He's the founder and president of ZayZoon. Tate, thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Brendan.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Xenium HR or the host, Brandon Laws. The material and information presented on Transform Your Workplace is for general information and educational purposes only. Xenium HR or the host, Brandon Laws, does not necessarily endorse any guest, their business, or any organization they represent. Discretion is advised. Please work with a trusted advisor to find a custom approach that fits your organization's needs.